This episode of The Clear Out was recorded on the 5th of September 2023 at home in Wicklow. And today's episode focuses, eventually, on the idea of credibility and what bestows credibility. Where does credibility come from? And this is in light of in response to a conversation that I had recently, where someone expressed a less than favourable view of the podcast and what I do here. So I thought it was an interesting topic to explore. There's a photo of puffins in hashtag blessed here on the calendar, and I was looking at those puffins and going, nobody doubts their credibility. And when I see a caterpillar or a moth or a beetle or a woodlouse or an earwig, I don't doubt their credibility. They're just doing what they're doing. And I think that's ultimately the point I come to in the episode. I express my own philosophy of doing things and the repeated doing of things. So anyway, here's to the puffins who don't get a shout out in the episode proper, but I'm shouting them out now. Hey puffins, good for you. Keep doing what you're doing. Okay, so that's what's coming up. Credibility and related matter. I will see you around the corner. Cheers.
Not gonna change my mind, leaving the dream behind, keep my emoji inside.
Hi, my name is Dara Clear and you're listening to The Clear Out. You're very welcome. I hope this moment finds you, yes, well. I'm predictable. I am predictable. Why wouldn't I want you to be well? It wouldn't be very charitable to say, welcome to The Clear Out. I hope this finds you in distress, because you can learn from distress. I hope life is teaching you lessons. I hope hardship is edifying your soul. I mean, come on now. My assumption always is, we're all dealing with something. That's my default assumption, that nobody is cruising, coasting, blissfully, serenely across life's pond. My assumption is everyone has something going on. Everybody's carrying something. Everyone is in some way off kilter, out of whack, not quite fully in themselves. Now, that may seem to be an unduly negative lens through which to view my fellow travellers, your fellow travellers, our fellow travellers. And I'm going to challenge that. I don't think it is negative. And when I say everyone's got some stuff going on, it doesn't mean you can't be in a very happy moment. It doesn't mean you can't be enjoying something very personally gratifying or satisfying in your life. You might be in a really good spell or period in your life, and good for you is all I can say. More power to you. And I know this might sound weird, but I'm happy for you. I mean, feed that positivity, no? Feed it, embrace it, appreciate it, and go, yeah, good. I'm glad you're doing well. I mean, resenting other people's success, I don't think that's the way forward. I think over my life so far, I haven't fallen into that trap. Occasionally on a more personal level, perhaps I might go, wow, you have dodged so many bullets. And in dodging those bullets, maybe your insight is less, your understanding of difficulty or suffering is less. And I don't want to use a very prejudicial word like privilege. I mean, that word is just way too loaded, isn't it? In today's discourse, in these times we find ourselves in. Privilege. I mean, I know I tick a lot of privilege boxes by being a white, straight male. I mean, I don't feel particularly privileged. I am aware of the good things in my life. I value the good things in my life. I know my situation could be an awful lot worse. And I try to engage my gratitude fairly regularly. And that does not mean that I'm not as capable as anybody else of feeling self-pity, of feeling life is unfair, of feeling why me. But it doesn't do much good. My experience has shown that not very many people give a shit. So you may as well get on with it, and try and put your best foot forward. I mean, that's for yourself. That's for myself. And I mean, this is kind of an area I want to talk about today, and it does go into the area of self-worth and self-confidence and self-belief. But I'm gonna come at it from a particular perspective, or look at it through a particular frame. But first, a weather report, because I know how many of you are curious to hear what we've been dealing with here in Ireland. If you're one of my overseas listeners. We've just had 2, 3, 4 beautiful days. I mean, truly, properly blue sky, sunny days. And they've sort of been shocking and overwhelming because there have been so few of them over the preceding 2 months. July and August were really underwhelming from a weather point of view. And suddenly you go, oh wow, this is what the summer should have been. And it does feel year to year that is a bit of a pattern when schools start back, that suddenly the sun comes out and goes, yeah, have some of this. Just when people are no longer really no longer truly in a position to enjoy it and revel in it. But yeah, I've been out in it working. You may recall last year I was taking down a chimney brick by brick. I think I chose that episode to talk about amour fou, crazy love, and female madness and sex and male obsession with female sexuality. And I think I leaned towards the idea that the chimney I was deconstructing was a phallic symbol. So I was kind of deconstructing male sexuality, or the male libido, or male desire. Anyway, I was back on that roof over the last few days, in baking sun. Yeah, those days, they take it out of you. I'm feeling a bit weary today. I mean, honestly, I've been feeling a bit weary of late, and I know, I can tell, I'm very aware of it. The dynamic on the podcast has been a little bit off, I would say, for some of my more recent episodes. And that's just it's been a bit of fatigue. It's been a bit of emotional fatigue. It's been a bit of my brain's been just a bit mentally scrambled and overwhelmed. So I haven't had the same sort of mental energy as I've recorded. And that's mostly been a byproduct of busyness and a pretty full schedule, and, you know, bumping around doing one thing or another, and not enjoying terrifically good headspace. And it's very difficult to record this when my resources are so low. But I also accept it. It's difficult. I mean, I've spoken about this, maybe not as directly, but I have spoken about this over the lifetime of the podcast. And I'm very accepting of the range in... I'm hesitating to use the word quality, because I continue to stand by what this offering is, which is fundamentally a longitudinal experiment, a longitudinal study of my examined life, and I just bounce off the through line. The through line is I'm here existing, and I'm not making any claims ever for me personally being an object of exceptionalism or particular fascination. But I do live something quite publicly in this space, which is, I mean, just to put it into a chronological context, I suppose I'm living out my midlife period. And sometimes that veers close to crisis point. And often it doesn't. But I'm trying to be open, and I'm trying to be honest, and I'm trying to be authentic, and I'm just trying to share my own questions and my own areas of interest. And occasionally I feel there's an insight that is worth putting out there. And I get something out of it, and I know some other people get something out of it as well. And it all gets tethered to this idea of being authentic, or trying to live in an authentic way with flaws and vulnerability, and honesty. I believe is a recipe for very resilient well-being. And you have to strike a balance. I mean, before I pressed record today, my brain was just following. My brain was just following certain feelings. It was following certain responses to things around me in the physical space. I'm here at the home studio in #blessed, and it's largely filled with musical instruments and pictures and photographs that my wife has put up, because this is sort of, she uses it more as her home office, and I jump in here once a week to do the podcast, so it's kind of her space. A shared space, our space. But I was just, looking around and allowing myself to be affected. Oh, sorry, I just knocked the stand. Don't knock the stand, it's a great stand. And just allowing myself to be, my thoughts to go to feelings, and that, I was just struck in the moment by, okay, so if you stay with feelings, that can be a very, depending on how you are at a given moment, like that can be a very overwhelming area to be in, the feelings area. I mean, I'm generally pretty comfortable with my emotional landscape, for better or worse. I have a good relationship with it. That is not to say that I'm always all good. I'm not. I'm often bad, and I have to kind of mind myself. But I try to approach my low points with a certain amount of compassion, a certain amount of non-judgment. But I suppose one thing I would be wary of in general, in real life, not just here on the mic, as much as I try to be a product of real life here, the wallowing in feeling is it's not very interesting. It's not very interesting, and it's not very I used the word edifying before. It's not very edifying. It doesn't really do much. It becomes very self-indulgent. And again, I'm not trying to distance or detach or negate feelings, but sometimes you've got to just hold your thought and go, this is my intention. Now maybe that's quite a martial arts sentiment. What's my intention? Keep my eye on the prize, shut out the white noise, stay focused. The martial arts engagement in terms of a fight is a very strange combination of being hyper alert, hyper vigilant, and hyper relaxed, and hyper fluid, and hyper open. Lots of hypers. It's a very heightened state that has to embrace contradictions, and the negotiation of challenging emotions, challenging feelings is part of that. So can I keep my focus? Can I view this conflict dispassionately? Can I focus on my own skill set? Can I trust that I'll be able to respond in an optimum way in very difficult circumstances? And if I come out on the other side of that, the worse for wear, if I come out somewhat battered, can my ego withstand it? Can my emotional state and my mental state withstand that and remain dispassionate and continue to hold the space? That's part of the training, and I think that's very useful in life as well. Because when conflict arises, when unpleasant things are put in your face, like in karate, it's a fist or a foot, and depending on the fist or the foot, there's a range of unpleasantness there. But in life, when something unpleasant is put in front of you, that is a conflict. How do you deal with that? How do you walk away from that exchange? And what tools do you have to deal with that and retain your sense of wholeness? Is how I'm thinking about it right now. So look, why don't I just jump into where I want to go today. So I was having a conversation very recently with somebody who knows me very well, and we were talking about the podcast, and it was very clear that this other person views what I do here and views me in the context of the podcast as unqualified, I think, is probably the most generous way I could express this person's opinion. No, their opinion isn't unqualified. That's how they view me, that I'm unqualified to be here doing this, and that there's a lot of people online talking out of their rear ends, that they're talking shite, talking rubbish, and just spouting opinions. And to quote this person, anyone can talk. And the implication was clearly that I was just another one of these people. And the idea of, having no qualification in the area that I purportedly have placed myself, i.e. mental health, well-being, wellness, a certain level of advocacy for, maybe in particular, but I don't think especially, but maybe in particular, men's mental health. I think I'm a pretty equal opportunities advocate. My message is for everyone. Anyone who wants to listen is very welcome. But it was confronting, and it was a bit edgy, and I'm not sure how unbiased the opinion was, but I'm not afraid to be criticised, and I'm very happy to walk away from something that was difficult to hear, and go, okay, is there any, does that hold weight? Does it speak to any of my own insecurities or fears or neuroses about what I do here, about the egotistic swing that allows someone, to put themselves in a public space and go, listen to me, I have something to say, I have something of value to share. I'm very aware of that. I've always been aware of that. And when I started the blog 10 years ago, I was aware of that. But I was very committed to the idea of, well, if you're going to put something out there in the public domain in these formats, the blog originally and now the podcast, just try and keep it real. Probably that's the overriding driver. Like, keep it real, be authentic, and hope. My hope, my ongoing weekly hope, is that I can pull together my thoughts and feelings and ideas in a coherent way and put them across in a way that makes them interesting, listenable, digestible, and a good sort of stepping off point for your own thoughts, the listener, for you to go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, or I've thought that too, or oh, that's interesting, I hadn't thought of it that way, or oh no, I think he's completely wrong. It's all good, and nobody's forcing anybody to listen. I wish I could. I wish I could force you all to listen and drive my numbers up, and that would create more opportunities. But the basic, the basic conclusion from this, it wasn't pleasant. It wasn't easy to listen to, but the basic conclusion was that this, in the eyes of this other person, the conclusion was that I lack credibility. And I'm interested. Credibility has been on my mind. I know a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, I did have an idea knocking around my head that I knew I wanted to talk about the idea of credibility, and I can't remember what the stimulus or the impetus for that was. I don't know where that came from. I can't remember where that idea came from and why I felt, oh yeah, that's an interesting thing to look at, because I do feel that what I'm doing here, what anyone who's a homegrown sort of content creator, someone who's putting stuff out in this kind of democratic landscape that is the internet, there's always a quality control issue. There's always a susceptibility to being accused of simply being someone with an opinion, and someone who's indulging their ego, indulging their personality, and jumping on bandwagons, and not not really coming from a place of, I don't know, a place of being informed, not really coming from a place with an authentic, and that sounds like a very judgy word, but like an authentic agenda, with a sort of a more a pure intent, as opposed to I just want to get hits, I just want to make some noise and get attention, I just want to play this role, and it's a very hard thing to quantify because it's very subjective. And as I was listening to myself use the language I just used, I had a sense of how sometimes people view acting like, oh, isn't it great to be, up on stage or out in front of people and everyone's looking at you, and this very sort of facile, superficial interpretation that is, put in a sort of a very egotistic lens of, oh, look, everybody look at me. I mean, I was joking last week about having my captive audience in the life modelling scenario I found myself in when I was in acting school. I mean, I find all that stuff still makes me laugh. Like that, it's such a cliche. The actor's ego, the narcissist, the egomaniac, the unaware, self-indulgent vanity of the actor. It's a cliche, but here's the cliche about cliches. The cliche about cliches is that all cliches do have a bit of truth in them, and I always find that stuff funny. The whole "there are no small parts, only small actors." I think it's hilarious, that stuff. I laugh at myself. I laugh at other actors, but anytime I've had the opportunity to act, I always value the internal experience, like what's going on internally. In what way can I serve the story? In what way can I serve this character? In what way can I serve the scene? And I think that's a different perspective. You're putting yourself beneath or behind the story, the experience, and hoping something you do is of value to the other people on stage with you, or if it's on set in a scene, and that the audience subsequently gets something from that product and from that synergy or from that chemistry. And what I was doing with the blog was in that territory as well. It was, okay, I'm going to expose myself and be vulnerable and put something out there that I've spent some time formulating or thinking about or trying to articulate. And I may, I'll go on a journey with this experience and put it out there to share. And it's the cliche, it's the journey that's of value to me. And if there's a product at the end of it that I can go, oh, that's actually not a bad product, that's also of value to me in terms of just an artistic process, or having an artistic end product that I can go, oh, okay, I did that, and that's well put together and well expressed. And then I move on. And I don't go back to sort of revisit the hits. It's not like there's so many hits to revisit. And the podcast has continued in that vein. And last week I started, for the first time maybe, I described the podcast as an organic experience. And you heard me use the word experiment earlier in this episode. So they may sound, I don't know if they come across as, words that are meant to be like disclaimers or overly self-deprecating or defensive. That's not my intention. I'm just being honest that when I sit down here any week, anytime I sit down here at the mic, I often have no idea where I'm going to go. I just sit and I know, okay, this is what I want to talk about today. And I try to step into a mode or into a zone where I can be attuned to my own thoughts and try to present them in a cohesive way and link them into the larger belief set that informs what I do here. And that, I repeat, is about trying to be authentic, trying to be real, trying to be open, trying to be vulnerable, and trying to live out a healthy self-examination, not an overly narcissistic, self-indulgent wallowing in self-fascination or self-absorption under the assumption that isn't this amazing for everyone, because I reject that with every fibre of my being. I'm like, I don't want to be around that. Why would you want to be around that? But yeah, in any case, I come back then to this idea of credibility, and where does credibility come from? Who bestows or confers credibility on someone or something? And does it have to be bestowed by others? Does credibility come from outside, or does it come from inside? And when I had that conversation about the podcast and this other person's point of view about the podcast, I didn't come back hard with, oh well, look at this and look at this, but I am a believer in the doing of things and the repeated doing of things to build muscle, to build experience, to build integrity, to develop learning. And this episode happens to be episode 120 of the Clear Out podcast, and I'm not going to lie to you, I'm proud of that. Now, it's not a pride that becomes a monstrous act of ego, but I can go, do you know what, that's a pretty good achievement, and I've done it every week, and I've been consistent, and I value consistency. I was thinking about this in the context of, last week I don't think I expressed particularly well my view of festivals, and I was talking about Burning Man in particular. But there was a point there that I failed to make, which is, I recognise the appeal of festivals to many people. They're looking for that exceptional experience. They're looking for that highlight to their year. They're looking to go and just be, I don't know, I don't want to put it into the cliche of let's go wild, let's let our hair down, let's go crazy for a weekend. Obviously that's a part of it for a lot of people, and it may involve drug taking, it may involve sex, it may involve whatever, this kind of, libertarian fever, a licentiousness, an indulgence. And I've never really had that in me. I'm not seeking the big apex experience. I'm personally very attached to, very tethered to the idea of, steady, repetitive practices. And the discipline that goes with that. And for me, I derive a lot of security from those practices. And I recognize that there's a conservatism to that. I recognize that there's a conservatism to ritual, to routine, to holding steady. And it's why I was never a sprinter. I was a middle distance runner, and the same with swimming. I'm not looking to be explosive. I'm looking to hold steady. And I think I think there's a value in that. And I like the calmness that can be a part of that. And there are times when, there are times when I can challenge that in myself and go, well, hold on a second. It's like when I was in when I started taking a drink, when I started having an alcoholic drink for the first time in my mid-20s, I'd kind of come to the realization that, you could probably use a drink every now and again. You're holding on a bit too tight there, steady boy. And, I was a mess. I was a mess in my early 20s. Absolutely. I was all over the place and raw and vulnerable as hell and really clueless as to the depth of my own pain and trauma and hurt, and how that had shaped me and what it had led me to present to the world, which was a very, I think, in the most embarrassing terms, could only be expressed as me kind of going, hey, look at me, I'm such a lovable guy, love me world. And I think a lot of actors can relate to that. But I know that was how I wanted to meet the world. And, it takes experience, and it takes growing up and, becoming a bit more mature. And in my case, it took therapy and help to kind of go, okay, hold on a second. What way is this you're walking in the world? What is this shape you're presenting? And what's the real deal? And I think, in my own case, a key, there've been different key moments. One key moment, definitely meeting my wife was a huge moment in terms of what she brought to me and the confidence she gave me to be more vulnerable, the confidence she gave me to seek help. And, I was ready to do that. And then, maybe getting my black belt in karate, maybe, staying with karate for as long as I have, rolling through some other black belt gradings. Yeah, I actually don't put a lot on that. I just felt like, okay, I'm just tipping away and trying to be truthful in my application. And if I'm doing that the right way, the acknowledgement will come in terms of gaining, another, level or another grade. But more meaningful to me would have been when I started the blog, out of which this has grown. And when I wrote for the first time on the blog, not long after I'd started it, maybe a month after I'd started, and I wrote a piece about my experience of depression, and I wrote in a very open, honest way about it. And that was a big moment because of the strength of the response to how I expressed myself and how I wrote about that. And I felt, okay, that's, and it wasn't, oh, isn't this lovely, all this amazing, I wasn't focusing on the response as such, but to go, it was more objectively that I recognized, oh, this has an effect. It has an effect when you put something honest out there into the world or out there into the space. It reaches people, it touches people, and it's it's of huge value to me as well. And that was a big part of why I started writing on the blog. It was just to kind of, can I get this scramble out of my head, out of the inside to the outside? Can I express and communicate what I'm trying to negotiate? And that has continued to be my kind of modus operandi, because it serves me, and I believe and continue to believe it has an impact on a positive impact on others. And that idea of having a positive impact was a big driver for starting the podcast, coming out of the pandemic, thinking a lot of people are in bad shape. A lot of people are in bad shape and are struggling with anxiety and a loss of identity, a loss of connection, a sense of overwhelm, a sense of despair. And that felt like it wasn't a bad moment just to move from writing to speaking, which some people find this more accessible. And that was part of the motivation for this as well. So, I mean, that would bring me back then to the idea of what's the starting point? What's the intention? What am I trying to achieve? And I'm happy that I've done that. And for me, I think I haven't made any false claims about what I do here. I haven't positioned myself at any point. I haven't positioned myself as an expert. I don't consider myself an expert in any area of my life. Probably because I haven't specialized in anything in my life or enjoyed a high level of success in any one particular area of my life. I used to think I was good at relationships. my wife might argue otherwise. But yeah, the question I asked before was, the idea of credibility. What bestows credibility on anything? And I can look at, say, my martial arts life and go, well, okay, I trained consistently for a lot of years, and I presented myself for examination again and again and again, and I was successful. And I got my black belt whenever it was, 20 years ago, and I've kept training, and you roll through more black belt gradings, and that is a validation. It's an acknowledgement, and you get the piece of paper to say, there you go, you're qualified, you're certified. And I think my experience has been, there's a lot of people who are qualified and certified with their pieces of paper who are shit at what they do. And that, whatever it is, if you want to call that a contradiction, or that flaw in the system, I feel like I've been very tuned into that from a very young age. And it's been a sort of a tuning into phoniness. It's been a tuning into disappointment, that the failings of others. I suppose it's where my idealism has always been located, that I have this expectation that person X should be like this, and they're not. And this type of job should look like this, and it doesn't. This type of environment should be like that, and it isn't. And I do not consider myself a contrarian. I'm very wary of contrarians. I find it's a bit of a pose, and it's a bit of a way to make themselves exceptional. I'm not afraid to challenge things. I'm not afraid to ask questions, but I do definitely have this streak in me where I go, look, that's fine. That's your title. That's your role. That's what the piece of paper says, but I'll make my opinion based on my experience. And my experience then will bestow the credibility. And that, I think, is I think fundamentally that's where I land on the whole idea of credibility. So, in my case, in defense of the podcast to this other person who was offering their critique, my defense would be, well, I'm doing it. Listen regularly and see for yourself what I'm doing. And it might not be your cup of tea. It might not be your bag. It might not be how you like this presented. But I'm being true to what I sort of set out to do and have remained steady. And I have a tiny listenership, I think. I think it's fair to say that. Objectively speaking, I don't have a huge audience. And therefore, I'm not getting widespread public acclaim, but I get little bits of just quiet acclaim from different corners. Some very, very meaningful. And I have to approve of myself. That's always a challenge, to kind of have that balance where I'm not being delusional or narcissistic or egomaniacal, and just go, no, I know this is a good product. I know what I'm doing has value. And because it's all me, I suppose the implication is I know I have value. And that's, that veers cringingly close to, adolescent angst or insecurity. I know I have value. I know I'm worth something. When that's coming out of the mouth of a 49-year-old man, you might go, here, come on now. I hear it too. I'm not unaware. But again, I'm putting it into the context of this conversation, of this discussion, and just I'm following the thought. So that's I am a great believer in that as well. This idea of, can you follow the thought? Like, where does it lead? What's this really? What's this really about? What's this really? Where's this really coming from? And to go back to the start of this and where this conversation started and this other person expressing their opinion, of course it's a challenge to me as a person. Of course it's a challenge personally. And as I say, that was a conflict. And can I walk away from that, absorb or look at, or step aside from the criticism so I can view it in a non-emotional way and go, do those criticisms have merit? Am I a fraud? Am I a phony? Now, those words were not used, but again, I'm talking about implications. Sometimes it's what's not said that speaks loudest. So that's the whole thing was a sort of a repudiation of what's been over 2 years of consistent effort and application on my part, and I had to kind of walk away and digest and reflect, and this is me kind of going, you know what, I give myself credibility. And see, in the larger picture, never mind blooming podcasts, never mind one man on a mic offering his point of view, but to come away, bigger picture and go, can you back yourself? Can you hold your own space? Can you retain your sense of value in the face of criticism, in the face of doubt, in the face of other people's absence of faith in you? That's that's challenging. And I believe ultimately you've got to come back to yourself and do your work on yourself and be unafraid of that criticism, be unafraid of that absence of faith, and really ask yourself, well, do I have faith in this? Do I have faith in myself? Am I I'm struggling with the word levying what the criticisms at myself. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. Am I putting those criticisms on myself? Do they hurt because they speak to my own doubts? And again, I'm saying I'm take this away from the podcast world and what I'm doing and my personal journey, but in general, in your own life, if you're going, hold on, this is not the response I was hoping for. Can I withstand this and hold the space? Can I withstand this and hold myself and go, no, I know what I'm doing. I have faith in what I'm doing. I trust my own decision making. And if you can say yes to those things, well, you're kind of flying, aren't you? You're kind of in very good shape. And it's a testament to your resilience. Even though the criticism or even though the conflict might have been hurtful, it might have been destructive in ways, and it might be a light switched off in your universe. I mean, that's an emotion you have to live with: the sadness, the disappointment, the rejection, whatever that might be. But we have to be careful, I think. We have to be careful of being invalidated by others. And again, this comes back to, a theme I've often raised in different contexts. But the idea of who do we allow to have power over us? This ties in with last week, talking about shame. Who are we allowing to put shame on us? Who are we allowing to plant that seed in us? Who do we give that power to? And again, if you talk about, my phrasing has been who bestows, who confers credibility. If that doesn't put you in mind of panels, bodies, institutions who give out qualifications, give out degrees, certificates, whatever it might be, licenses. I don't know what else you would think of, but there is the idea of the greater power, the higher authority. And so sometimes that can be very black and white. You have applied yourself on a certain course. These are the expectations in terms of what you have to show proficiency with. This is the skill set you have to demonstrate. This is the body of knowledge you have to be familiar with. This is the examination, the assessment, the thesis, whatever it might be. And yeah, we're satisfied you've done that. Here you go, boom. Now go out there and, ply your craft. And that can be a very black and white situation, like in a training environment, in education, obviously, in a career advancement context, perhaps. But I think when it comes to our interpersonal relationships, we have to be very careful who we allow to hold that power over us. And maybe that's something to be very concerned about if, and again, I don't consider myself particularly old, but I'm not a kid anymore. And I don't know. Ask yourself, do you allow someone have that power over you? Have you entrusted your journey and sense of self to that extent to somebody else, so their view of you can have that amount of power? There's very few people in my life that I would extend that to personally, because I don't. I suppose I don't trust. I don't trust people enough to give them that sort of leeway, that courtesy. And again, that comes back to the idea of nakedness from a couple of episodes ago, to be truly naked in front of somebody, in the emotional sense. It's a great honor to extend to somebody, I believe. Yeah. Okay, so I'm trying to think now if there's anything else I want to have on that. I was listening to Willem Dafoe, the actor. He was on the Smartless podcast. He is an interesting guy and a very distinctive, unique individual. I think he's a great actor. I find him eminently watchable in anything that he does. I mean, physically, he's always been a very striking looking man. Very unique looking. I spoke about him relatively recently because I was talking about To Live and Die in LA, one of his earlier roles on screen. I mean, he's had a long career in theatre as well. But just listening to him being interviewed on that podcast, just a guy who, a true artist, I think, and there's no pretentiousness attached to that. Just somebody who is in his art, in his craft, in his vocation, the way he speaks about acting and performance, the kind of humility, I think, of a great artist. The art is greater than the artist. I mean, and does it get any simpler than that? I should get Alan Clark back on to hear his thoughts on that idea. But I think you're a servant of your own skill set. You're a servant of the larger ideal. It's a very Platonic idea, I suppose. The perfect art. But I mean, that applies to martial arts as well. Karate, in my case, you're serving the larger art form. Like, there's a perfect punch, there's a perfect kick that I'm not capable of, particularly now when my hips are dodgy and my mobility is quite diminished. But you're serving the intention to get to that place, and if that intention is pure, there will be something of merit in the act, in the execution, in the delivery. And listening to Willem Dafoe talk about acting, I feel he wasn't a million miles away from that sort of thinking. And that thinking definitely lends itself to the podcast, what I'm doing here. It's intention. It is intention. It is the idea of trying for something. It is the idea of stepping into a history and stepping into a legacy, historically. And now that might sound grandiose, but I believe that it's not, hey, look at me and my amazing thing and like that I started, I mean, that's absurd, because people have been thinking and talking and processing and sharing and communicating for as long as we've been around. So I am utterly ordinary and everyday and not unique and not exceptional in what I'm doing here. And I'm not saying I'm not being disingenuous when I say that. I'm just another person stepping into that slipstream of curiosity and of examination and of a certain day-by-day existential exploration. And I do it because I'm interested in it, and I do it because I think it's of value, not just to me, but to others. And that's the gig. So it's not always sexy. It's not always sexy. It's not always breezy. It's not always essential clickbait. And it's a little bit long form. It's a little bit slow media. And I make no apologies for that. I want it to be that. I'm happy that it is that. And yeah, I think I will leave it there. You don't have to You don't have to come at me with, Dara, it is a credible thing you're doing. You are credible. I've just bestowed credibility on myself. I am my own institution, and I confer degrees on a regular basis. How about that? Okay, on that note of defiance, I will love you and leave you. And thank you so much for listening. If you spent this hour with me, I really do appreciate it, genuinely. It's lovely when anyone ever gets in touch and goes, yeah, I really enjoyed that episode. Thank you very much. If you're a regular listener, brilliant. If it was your first time, I hope you coped. And as always, you can throw me love on social media. The links will be there wherever you listen, but I'm in all the usual places. Instagram and Facebook particularly. YouTube, Twitter, now X, less. I don't spend very much time there. And you can email me if you're so motivated at the clearoutlive@gmail.com. If you want to throw your financial heft behind this independent podcast, you can do so using the Patreon link. That's patreon.com/theclearout. And Jesus, that would be amazing if you felt, yeah, this is worth €1 a month, or 2 or 3 or 5 or 20 or whatever you want to give. It'd be very welcome. And it's not meaningless at all. It means a lot to me, I can tell you. And then I can turn around to the disbelievers and go, you know, some people actually pay me to do this, if you can believe that. Here's a screenshot. Okay. Be well, be safe, mind yourself. And don't wait for someone else to tell you you're credible. Do it for yourself. Yeah. You forge your own path and forge your own world. And yeah, you'll be okay. Okay, I will talk to you next week. Thanks again for listening. Mind yourselves. Bye.